Welcome back to the Camp Memories podcast from Kramer to the Hill. This is part two of our conversation with Dan Wolf, the son of Camp Hess Kramer founder Rabbi Alfred Wolf. In part two, we talk about Dan's experiences as a camper and counselor and how camp made an impact in his life after camp. If this is your first episode with us, we have linked part one in the card above, and it's also below in the description. Enjoy.
And speaking of your experience at camp as a camper and a staff member, it's kind of a two-part question. I know that this past last summer, you had the opportunity to celebrate your 60th anniversary of your leadership year, which is the 10th grade 15-year-old year at camp, where you got to sing your song and do your cheer of Sheldon's Rangers, the great Al Sheldon. Who were your major influences at camp when you were growing up and when you were essentially learning how to be a staff member and a leader?
There were three who loomed largest, who are also probably you'll always feel pretty obvious, which are Steve Brewer, Chuck Feldman, and Steve Makoff, who in the glory days, Steve was camp director. Starting in there was a man named Sam Hammerman who was the first camp director, and in 1962, I believe, Steve, at I think the age of 26, became his successor as camp director. Steve Makoff became assistant director, and Chuck Feldman, starting in 55 or 56, was the song leader. These guys were just great. and they working as a team, and people watching this perhaps will remember Steve Makoff and Chuck as the directors of Hilltop, but that was later. So when they were and the interesting about Chuck, for anybody who didn't deal with Chuck, he played the piano, and I thought that's what song leaders do, but then I found out, they all play the guitar. Chuck was the exception, and Chuck also composed the music that became, as Paul knows better than anyone, was really the soundtrack of camp, especially on Friday nights at Shabbat. And he's leading on the piano, and it was really a Class A team running the camp at the top. Then, of course, there were individual counselors who made tremendous impacts. A counselor named Art Levine, and yes, Al Sheldon. When I was in leadership, we were in Cabin Dave, and interestingly, the whole Sheldon's Rangers thing. So though for most of you who probably don't know, Sheldon's Rangers, we would go marching through camp, our cabin, the leadership cabin, and there would be one of us would be the main refrain was we'd be marching and it'd say, "Who makes them rough, who makes them tough? Sheldon's Rangers, rugged Rangers. Who makes them want to eat their guff? Sheldon's Rangers, rugged Rangers." And then there were verse after verse after verse. But there was another camper in our cabin named Kerry Katz, who was a really dynamic guy, and he came up with this whole thing. Al Sheldon went along with it, but it wasn't Al's idea at all. Al was, it wasn't really him to make a big deal about himself, but Kerry came up with this, and we would go marching, doing this whole thing, and it became a part of camp lore, and it certainly was a big part of our leadership identity that we were Sheldon's Rangers. We were Leadership 65, but Sheldon's Rangers. And these things have a huge impact. And then I am very proud, unfortunately, because of the fire, there were three of us who showed up last year, which is still pretty good, to come down to Carlsbad for the 60th. For our 50th, I'd have to go over the records. We had 10 or 12 of us came back to camp, which is awfully good after 50 years,
Very.
and showed up and were in the amphitheater. And some of them I hadn't seen for nearly 50 years, but you immediately have that bond. Kerry Katz was there, and he led us in Sheldon's Range. We all got to be Sheldon's Range that night, uh, and um, and if the camp hadn't burned, we would have had a lot of people coming up for that. So the idea that many people after half a century still wanted to come out and come together, that makes a statement in itself.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I think all of us here absolutely are hoping to get back to Malibu as soon as we possibly can,
Yeah,
so
I
that
mean,
we can.
may I insert? I was
Sure.
there in November, right after they gave the green light to do this phase one construction. It was amazing. Like, they were completely ready to go once the the Wilshire Temple board gave the green light for this, and it was amazing how much construction and activity there already was. Brewer Lawn was already green again. They had sodded it. Uh, the the staff building, infirmary, had already been stripped down to the studs to rebuild that. It was very heartening to see the place coming to life again. Uh, and and it seems it's very much moving fast to basically be reestablished as everything but a summer camp, as a conference grounds and for other occasions until let's hope soon they can raise the necessary money to do the whole thing. But after all this time where it was just sitting idle, it was very encouraging to see all that.
Dan, I wanted to pick up on your reference to Chuck because I'll just, one, in passing, say that my friend Paul Roberts and I, together with another friend, Brad Lebowski, just completed a project where we were recording music of Chuck's and influenced by Chuck, which we participated in for about 2 years. And it,
Right.
it was really testament to the three of our relationship with Chuck and how we felt that he had influenced us as musicians, as song leaders, as people, right? Myself, I was a disciple as a piano player. I really wanted to be him. And then I realized that he has a unique position at one temple in one place in the world and with one camps. And there wasn't much, weren't many other great job prospects for being Chuck other than for Chuck, right? So I decided to pursue some other things in career. But the point is that Chuck was an incredibly inspiring man, and along with the other people who you mentioned were inspirations to you. I think the point is that there was a generation of people at camp, including, sounds like you and Paul Roberts and me, who really felt that those guys who you mentioned were just so strongly important in helping us grow up right and and to be good Jewish people, and that they meant camp for us, right? That's what camp was about, was their leadership. And to go back and see an empty campus, to look at Yerba Buena Road without them, is a very different experience. It's like almost hollow, right? So I really just wanted to echo your comments and particularly call out Chuck for those of us who cared about the music or were musicians, for how important he was to us.
No, and again, for me, there's a somewhat unique aspect in as much as, first of all, Chuck was also the music director at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, and Steve Brewer went on to become the executive director of Wilshire Boulevard Temple. So these people weren't just people I knew from camp. They were very much part of my life in an ongoing way. Indeed, I'm happy to, unfortunately, Chuck has passed away, but last year, Ellie, my wife, and I had dinner with Steve and his brother and his wife, Steve's 89th birthday, and he's doing remarkably well at that age. And I'm actually down, we have a place in Cardiff by the Sea, Encinitas, San Diego area, and Steve Makoff lives near here, and we reconnected with him. So I've been lucky enough to continue to have relationships, but to your point, it's as with my father, as he, was less and less involved in the camp in a real way, and these other guys who were so involved with the camp, but then nobody stays forever, and the fact that the camp clearly it wasn't just about them. The camp, every director has a different vibe, but the concept of the camp, the whole idea of the camp, lasts beyond all these people, which is very important, and I'm sure wherever he is, gratifying for my father, because that was the goal.
And to tag along to that, Dan, I'd like to get, your insight. You had a long career at Disney and as a speechwriter for, many large Fortune 100 companies. How did your camp experience help you and did it help you decide how your future endeavors were going to go?
Subtly, I guess. I mean, not in an overt way, and certainly not like you guys who Chuck Feldman influenced your music careers or music involvement or music passions or however you want to define how music has continued to be a driving force in your lives. It's not that. There was something about the camp experience. Certainly, camp had a huge effect on me as a parent. Being a counselor for 6 years, junior counselor 3 or CIT junior counselor and senior counselor, I think has a profound effect, or certainly had a profound effect on me, having responsibility for these 8 kids, and being annoyed by them. You are essentially a parent figure and a parent substitute, and I would not be the parent I have been without that. If I just had summer jobs, it just would be really different, I really think. And I'm curious how you guys feel about that. As far as my career, I think there is still a link. The whole idea of, again, once you're a counselor and all this, and you're leading songs and you're giving speeches to your campers, giving speeches to the whole camp and all that, and the spotlight is on you and all, and to the extent I was then scripting people who had spotlight on them, there's definitely a connection, but not as obvious, I think, as it might be for other people. And certainly not as obvious because there are people who went to camp who became camp directors, who became, really became their careers. So that was not the case for me. It was a somewhat out-of-body experience the first summer I didn't go to camp. I graduated, I was a counselor in 71 was my last time, and I was a leadership counselor, like I felt it had come full circle. And then I graduated college in 72, and then I got a real job after that, and it was pretty weird to not be living in Malibu that summer. And there was something pretty profound when I left. When I got my check, at the end of the summer, Steve gave you a check, and my $350, I think. But I knew this was it. I knew I wasn't coming back the next year. And it felt right. I mean, it felt like I had done what I wanted to do as a camp person, but still, you're saying goodbye to a big chunk of your life.
I can attest to it feeling weird that first summer of not working at camp. That for me was in 2012 because I was moving across the country for my first big girl job, ironically in Alabama. But yeah, that was a time in my life that I survived. And then
Did you ever make it to Dothan?
I did not. I lived in Birmingham, or I was in Hoover, but I worked in Birmingham and did a lot of travel throughout the South and was probably the one Jewish person for that most people had met in their entire lives.
Yeah, well, we can talk privately about, it was, imagine you're a German immigrant and you're now in the Deep South in 1940 when the South was really the South, and he's going to, part of his idea was, I'm going to reform the South. I mean, anyway, there's lots of stories that I was not present for, but I heard about, and yes, I imagine if you had the
Yeah.
experience you had, imagine the experience he was having.
Yeah, one of the things when we were prepping for this episode, Dad Paul mentioned your sister Judy was one of the early dance directors, and of course there is the dance platform that obviously I have spent my entire life walking past back and forth, but I had never really known by the time we got to me in the 90s and my first years at camp of the story behind Judy and her experiences that led to her staying and going through the process to become one of the specialists. So can you speak a little bit on her time there and her impact on the camps?
Yeah, well, she was 5 years older than me, so she preceded me in all this, and I believe, I'm pretty sure, Paul may know better than I, leadership didn't exist for her. And so she actually wasn't in leadership, I'm pretty sure. And I know my brother wasn't. So a lot of things we think were there forever were not, including leadership. But and so she became counselor and she went to UCLA and was a dance minor and then became a dance specialist at the camps. And it was all very formative and important to her as for me. And then she graduated. She went on to become ultimately a school principal with the LA Unified School District. Very sadly, in 1986 rather, she got ovarian cancer and battled it for a year and a half. Incredibly, while after her diagnosis, her boyfriend married her, was extraordinary, standing by her side. And so then the dance platform was named in her memory after she died, and which was more than fitting. So and let's hope there's a new Judith Wolf Lee dance platform in our future. But that's part of her legacy.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Obviously, dance has been so integral to our camps for at least the entirety of my experience when David Dasa has, had come in and taken the lead on dance. But I remember many summers of both programming and also dancing on that dance platform.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunately it was made of wood. So that was one of the things that went, although God knows, for anybody not familiar with what survived at the camp, with that fire raging, there were these 3 buildings that didn't burn, and one is the old staff building and infirmary complex that is old dry wood, and somehow
we still don't know how that happened, how that thing survived.
Because right next to it, Gildred Hall, completely gone.
Yep,
it's bizarre.
Yeah,
and and just to tag along about Judy, I think that one of the great legacies that happened at camp, especially with your generation, when they did name the dance platform in honor of Judy, there was a weekend event at camp.
That's right.
Which I think was sold out from what I remember, and the theme of the event was "You Can Go Home Again."
Right. And it was,
And this is one of the great, I think, legacies of the camp, and one of the reasons why you have so many families that are second and third generation families that are part of the camps to this day. And to pick up on something that you talked about when you were working on your career and your real jobs. I think that subtly camp helped me as a song leader to be able to get up in front of people and present,
Mhm.
which I probably would have never had the opportunity to do so had I not been in front of anywhere from 5 to 1,000 people at any one given time, especially during visitors' days. So I think it had some significant character development
Yeah,
for me, and for a lot of people.
absolutely. And you, as you were talking, triggering some other memories, which is the amphitheater, which is didn't burn because it can't
Yes.
burn. And one thing I knew when the camp was burning, I said, well, at least the Alfred Wolf Amphitheater is not going to burn, uh, because there's nothing. Anyway, everything else burned around it, but
If I
it's
remember correctly, the sign only got a little bit charred, and
yeah.
it was
Well,
mostly
Yes.
intact.
well, let's talk more mystically. The Rabbi Alfred Wolf Inspiration Point wooden sign
Also
next to the
survived.
mountain menorah did not burn. The whole hillside burned. How that happened, I don't know. The Alfred Wolf Amphitheater sign at Hilltop, the wooden sign, also did not burn. So these were nice touches anyway.
Yeah.
But speaking of the amphitheater, I remember it being built. I remember before it's being built, there was a guy named Larry Houston who uh, who who was an earth mover, he had bulldozers and stuff, uh, and he carved up the mountain to create the amphitheater. Watching it was harrowing because it looked like things would fall over, but he knew what he was doing. So he first carved it into the wall, and then there was a guy named Pappy Boyington who was this kind of master stonemason. And for 3 years, he oversaw the construction of it, which was all by kids. My brother, I very much remember, I was too young. I, I couldn't really help. But mostly high school kids and stuff were doing it row by row. And unlike the amphitheater at Hilltop that was just sort of poured concrete and wasn't reinforced and wasn't built well, that amphitheater at Hess Kramer is built to last as long as the Greek amphitheaters. I mean, the guy was an artist and showed them what to do. And I have memories of it.
Yeah, thank God for that, because I'll just echo to say that when I drove past the camps a month or 6 weeks ago and looked over and saw that the amphitheater was seemingly intact, at least from Yerba Buena
No,
Road, I
it
was
it looks good,
really reassured.
and a wonderful touch in the plan for rebuilding is they're not going to rebuild. You know how the amphitheater had the stage and basically Brew Hall was that's what you were staring at when you're sitting in the amphitheater. The plan is to have it open when in the reconstruction. So you're going to have a view of the whole canyon, the whole view. It's going to be open to the world, and the world will be open to it, and that'll be nice.
Yeah.
So, the issue about dance brings up an interesting point, which is that perhaps of all the arts that we did at camp, I think dance was probably most central to our role with Israel, because so much of what we did was Israeli folk dance, and we did a little bit of fun other stuff, but it was mostly Israeli folk dance. Of course, with the other arts like music and visual art, it wasn't all Israel focused, right? But dance
Right.
Was
Definitely,
mostly.
and especially back then. I think Israel's become more of a piece of the camp experience, uh, much more so than when I was at the camp. And when you talk about formative things, for me, it was the drama elective. Friday nights, that all has changed, but Friday nights was theater night after the Shabbat. So it wasn't the jumping around in Lakers outfits to loud music. It was completely different. It was the Brew Hall was set up as a theater, and we had a stage. And the drama elective, after a couple of weeks of preparation, put on a play, and that was a huge focus for me my entire year, was to be in that play and have as good a part as I could. And you're talking about career and all that, just doing that, as you were saying about being a song leader in front of a lot of people, being in a play in front of a lot of people, these are not trivial experiences for a developing kid, to say the least.
Absolutely. I think I can shoulder the blame. It was my generation of counselors, campers, that started the let's wear jerseys on Friday night trend. So that is something I think that goes back to around 2010 is kind of when that all started happening.
Yeah, well, it feels very different but I'm philosophical. On the one hand, I'm very possessive because no, that's not how it should be. Friday night should be this sedate, formal. We should have theater and all that. But then the part of me that can let go goes, oh no, it's supposed to evolve and change with time. It can't be stuck in the mud. And I get that. Part of me gets that. Part of me doesn't get it. But all I know is that was just part of the structure and the pattern of my life, and the year and the camp experience was that. And then the Olympics at the end, the last 3 days, these were things that were just like the sun rising and setting. This is how life is. But then over time, these things change.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our conversation with Dan Wolf. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on part 3. And don't forget to tune in to part 1 if you haven't done so already. Also, if you haven't heard from the camps in a while, you can update your contact information by visiting wbtcamps.org/alumni/update your info, which is linked down in the description. We'll see you in the next episode.